Hello, my fellow modeling and tabletop gaming enthusiasts, and welcome to the Mediocre Modeler Show. We've got a very special episode for you. Joining me today is my great friend, Mr. Peter Gosling. Pete, thank you so much for joining me today.
No, it's an absolute pleasure to be here, George.
That's great to hear. So for those of you that are not familiar with Pete, he is the head of marketing and product at Warlord Games, and also, the really exciting part, the head of development for Konflikt 47. So we are going to have a great talk about the new edition of Konflikt 47 that's coming out very, very soon. Not soon enough for my liking because I'm a very impatient person, but very, very soon in the grand scheme of things. So first things first, Pete, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and hop in the shotgun seat of the DeLorean here with me, and we're going to get this bad boy up to about 88 miles an hour, and we're going to go back in time about 3 years. So about 3 years ago, Warlord makes the decision to acquire the Konflikt 47 IP from Clockwork Goblin. Can you tell us just a little bit what spurred that decision?
Well, Warlord had worked with Clockwork Goblin for a number of years before that to bring Konflikt 47 to the market in 28mm. All of the guys that made Konflikt originally, they all have their full-time jobs, things like that, and it just came up in a discussion, and we thought actually it's something that we would like to own, something we'd like to develop more, something we'd like to put more of our resources behind. And we were able to negotiate a really good deal with the guys at Clockwork Goblin, and so it was just a great opportunity for both of us at the right time. It was very much just a timing thing. Warlord's very keen to develop intellectual properties that they own. And because we're so closely involved with it, it just felt like a natural thing for us to pursue. And, it worked out, and, here we are.
Yes. So very clearly, Warlord felt that that Konflikt 47 was something worth pursuing enough to invest and purchase the IP outright. So, and since immediately after the acquisition, that was kind of a big thing. And things were kind of a little quiet afterwards, but you also had a lot of other stuff going on. I mean, with Bolt Action 3rd Edition and everything in the works. And then we'll fast forward just to about a year ago when kind of the first big announcement was made that I think it was Andy Chambers and Roger Garish were joining the creative team for Konflikt 47, which it's like, okay, people have been kind of, the chatter in the background, like there always is with gamers, that there was nothing going on since the acquisition and all that, but that was most certainly not the case, was it?
No, absolutely not. And we kicked off with quite a big meeting, actually, an off-site meeting. We all got around, we all talked a bit about what we wanted Konflikt to be, and we knew it's got so much potential, but we knew that bringing it out would have that sort of one chance to do it, and we needed to make sure that we were doing that at the right time, so making sure that fit into our release schedule as needed, and also making sure that we'd given it enough time to develop it and got the right level of investment, both in terms of money and in terms of time as well. So doing that at the right time was critical, and one of the most pivotal things in terms of when it happened was Bolt Action 3rd Edition. So what we didn't want to do was jump the gun with anything. So we'd been working on Bolt Action 3rd Edition for quite a while in the run-up to buying the Konflikt 47 intellectual property. And we thought, well, actually, let's make sure that we get that out at the right time. And we like to do our bigger launches around this sort of time of year. It's just a rhythm that we're in. It works kind of well for Christmas as well, if we're honest. And so having to get Bolt Action 3rd Edition out of the way first was a clear thing that we wanted to do. So and when I say get it out of the way, it's just, make sure that that's been successfully launched. We've done that justice. We've given it lots of time and attention. We've delivered. And one of the key things I was very keen to do with that, and I know we're talking about Konflikt, we're talking about Bolt Action for a minute, is to come out and say, these are the books we're going to bring out. This is the roadmap for what we're going to do, and then go and deliver that. So it was so important. I just thought, well, Konflikt is going to take up a lot of time. Konflikt's very different to making something like Bolt Action. There's a lot more creative decisions that have to be made. You have to make a lot more up. You have to think about the backstory, think about make sure how you're getting the support for all of those things. Whereas there's years and 80 years of writing about not bolt action but World War II, so there's lots of that sort of backstory and or that understanding of what was going off. So that doesn't exist for Conflikt, not in the same way. So make sure that we were able to start getting that level of resource available for it. So we'd got bolt action done, and then we'd got the writing team, and then we got some more of the miniature designers. We started looking at artists, and we actually built quite a big team. That there's a few people internal, and then we've also got people like Andy Chambers, who joined, and Roger Garish, and they were names that we were able to put out there and say, look, these guys are working on the rules. That's when they started, and eventually a little bit after that we got in touch with the artist Steph Kapinski, who we talked to about that, and it's just been brilliant working with all of them and pulling that team together. But it takes time, so play testing and rules writing and re-editing and going back over those things, in terms of taking the time to lay out a 200-page book. And I promise you, when you see this book is it's phenomenal. I couldn't be happier with it. We literally went off to print last week, and it's just such a consistent and well worked piece of collaborative creative work between all of the people in that team. It's just been brilliant to work with them all.
I mean, everything that we've seen so far, and it seems like the information that's being released is starting to steamroll, and I'm getting, and I've talked to you a number of times, and just I am excited. I am all in, and it's starting to steamroll, and I'm just getting so excited. And I want to touch on something really quick that you mentioned. Is you said it takes a little while to get things rolling. That's exactly right. It takes a while to build up a head of steam. So while things may have been kind of quiet, there's been a lot of stuff going on in the background, and we're finally, I say finally, and that sounds, a little, abrasive for lack of a better term, but, we're getting to see the results of those efforts and getting to see, everything that's been going on now. And it's really, really cool. It's so cool.
Just imagine for a second what it's like for us as well. We've had all of this stuff running around in our heads. We'll send WhatsApps to the creative team like 10 o'clock at night because we've stumbled across something that we thought was really cool as an idea, or we should be inspired by this, or something we've read, or an idea that we've had, or and we've been working on this for so long to finally get that out there to people, and get feedback on that. And people, the bit that cheers me up massively is all the people that are jumping in now. They're buying the big bundle, they're going for these things, and they know so little realistically about, we've got so many more stories to tell, so many more things to talk about, backstories and short stories, and other bits of the lore that we want to get out there and explain a lot about why we're doing what we're doing. But there's so many people that believe in that already and believe in us, and are excited enough to put in that pre-order. And we have this three-month pre-order window, and we have to make sure that our marketing covers all of that, and it's going to ramp up. And from that launch month, there'll be so much going off all around the world in various things, talking about Conflikt, and YouTube videos and all that sort of stuff, and magazines, other bits, loads of stuff we'll publish on our community site. So we're just so excited to say, and we want to tell everybody everything now, but it will just all get lost. You have to put something out there, let it settle. Now put the next bit out, let that settle, and go through and do that stuff. And it kind of feels like we're drip feeding and that sort of stuff, but we've got all this content. You've got to give everything its room to breathe, So
yes.
Some people like to binge watch programs, right? Some people like to do the week by week. I know there's something I've just watched and it's made me wait week by week, and I kind of enjoyed that week by week waiting, and it just let every episode sit. And so hopefully that's what people see. Is, we'll put something out and we'll let it sit. And I don't know if you've seen it, George, actually yet, but we haven't pushed it massively hard. But we've just done an audio version of the linebacker story. So we've got somebody who works for us, absolutely phenomenal. He just said, "Oh, I can do this stuff," and he sends you this audio file, and you're like, "This is incredible." we're gonna put that out there. So we're trying new things. We're venturing into new ways to get these stories and these cool things out to people. So it's really exciting, and we're very, very experienced as a team, but we're all still learning. It's a very competitive place to be at the minute. Barriers to entry in the industry have never been lower. You walk around UK Games Expo or Adepticon, and everybody's got great art, everybody's got great miniatures, everybody's got stories, everyone's got these great stands, and everyone's got absolutely fantastically passionate people talking about the products. And you just think it just couldn't be a better time for gamers with all that level of choice and everything like that. So just make sure Konflikt is seen and understood, and we get that message through is something we're going to work really hard on.
Yeah, and people might think I'm just being a shill or something, but I really do applaud the efforts that you guys have been going to lately. You mentioned kind of drip feeding information, and at the same, it does feel kind of like that, but at the same time, you mentioned being forced to wait to watch that next episode of that show you're really into. I've kind of, maybe I'm a sick individual, I've been enjoying that, because it's like we get that one piece, just that little piece, and then there's something in it that you just want to start tugging at that thread, and just keep going deeper and deeper. And I've been really enjoying that. And with, you put out the 2 short stories, and I did listen to a portion of the audio version of, I think Combat Drop is the name of the story.
Yep.
Just a portion of it yesterday when we were driving up to our vacation spot yesterday. Very well done. I enjoyed the story. And then of course we've had the 2 lore articles introduced on the community website earlier this past week, or technically last week. Today is Sunday. Semantics. Very, very good. And then of course, the previews from the various, I think starting at the UK Games Expo is when we got the big reveals. Of course, the initial reveal back in Adepticon, which really kind of started amping up the hype. And then we had the UK Games Expo, and then there's one just recently here in the US, which, there was a second large scale linebacker, which was pretty cool to see. So we've got this new version. It's well underway. Awesome stuff is happening. And you've mentioned before that Konflikt 47 is going to be the game of heroes, horrors, monsters, and mechs. And I know just recently you elaborated on that on the Warlord Games podcast. But so what is the significance of heroes, horrors, monsters, and mechs?
So that it was something that kind of just cropped up. I blurted it out and said, "Oh, that's what it is," and it stuck, because it really does summarize kind of the four main aspects of the game. It doesn't necessarily talk about one of the bits about make sure the intellectual property is woven in there, but it touches on the sort of 4 key cornerstones of that. Really, so a little bit less about the design methodology, but a little bit more about actually what the game is. So heroes are massively important in the game. We want to tell stories about people. We're going to create this world. Bolt Action very much is an infantry game. It's about taking your troops, and a lot less about named characters and things like that. So that we do a few of those things, and there's a few of the heroes from World War II and Dick Winters and all those sorts of things, but they don't feature quite in the same way. So very much so, Konflikt 47 is about a bit more individual. So there's obviously your army, but there's going to be named characters for every army that you can take. All of your platoon commanders are going to have, and this is something we talked about at Adepticon. We changed the names ever so slightly since then, but is those points to spend on changing the outcome. So that one individual model, or a couple of those, can have such an impact in the game. So we talked about one of the things we went back and talked about earlier, Doors, was about how the rift and how that part should interact within the game. Because one of the things that I always had, and I really enjoyed playing Konflikt 47, but if I'd nipped out and somebody swapped the models around, then it wouldn't necessarily feel too different a game had I come back. So we said, well, actually, if that happens when we're playing Konflikt, if you take those miniatures out and actually you put in a normal infantry unit, and those bits, it would feel different, because it doesn't have the rift abilities. It doesn't have the hero points to spend on things. So that was a huge part of that. So heroes are huge in the game, and you'll be able to assign points and do various things as you want to, and you may be able to put an order dice back in the bag. You may be able to re-roll a dice. You may be able to up and down the result of that, or whatever it might be, to just to really enhance the game. Horrors. So horrors is not about monsters, because monsters is about monsters. So what is horror about? So horror is about the horror of war, and I think you see that in quite a lot of the visuals. The visuals have changed quite a lot since the previous edition of Konflikt. We flick through the book, and it's a bit more about. There's some ruins in there, and there's some. It's very much green grass and foliage and that sort of stuff. And one of the key parts of the Konflikt story is the bombing of Dresden. We said, oh, well, let's go back and look at Dresden. And Dresden, you go back and look at those photos, and it is a horror. That level of destruction, and in a world where the rift opened up and we can start creating much more destructive machinery and weaponry and all of that sort of stuff, we said, well, actually, I think that humanity versus humanity is essentially what the game's about. Is that arms race between these nations, that accelerating that destruction. So visually, the horror of the situation is what we wanted to convey a lot more. So there'll still be fighting in the countryside, there'll still be fighting on the beaches, all those sorts of things. But if for those of you that saw the demo, the mega display at UK Games Expo, and certainly there's lots of photos online about it, you'll see it go from this sort of desolate countryside in towards a destroyed city, and it just tries to get across that the countryside's still there, but actually these cities are, they're taking a beating, and people have been really horrible to each other. It isn't Dresden, but necessarily that table could be. It's used in very different ways, but you'll see that feature quite heavily as a theme. So that's horror. So monsters. Monsters are very much as we think. So all your Nachtauben, your Nachtjäger, Shrek, Wolf, and Ursus, those things, and it's all about those monsters that have been created. But these are created by man. So these aren't werewolves. What they are is the scientific creation of those things, and you'll see that visually come through on the new miniatures and things that we do. It will lean into that theme a little bit more, because this is very much about the rift and how that empowered mankind to go off and do these things. So that's very much about monsters. So you'll have vampiric things, but they're not necessarily vampires. You'll have werewolves are not really werewolves, and giant bear men type things with maws that are going to smash things around. So that's Heroes, Horrors, Monsters. And then mechs I shouldn't really need to explain. We've seen the linebacker, we've seen the mudskipper, we've seen the pond skater, we've seen the Heuschrecht and the Vogelspinner and those bits. So that kind of illustrates the other way that mankind has taken this. So these scientists have gone very much, oh, look what we can do. We can go and create token quarks and Ursus and those things, and we can mess around with science in the genetic way. But then there's a whole bunch of other people who go, hey, let's go and create some AI automated infantry and some giant mechs that we can pilot and jump out of planes with and drop down and shoot Tesla guns at people. So that's Heroes, Horrors, Monsters, and Mechs, and I think it neatly sums up those four key things that really summarize Konflikt.
Yeah, and I think when you had that original announcement at Adepticon, I went there, and I think the next day you and I were talking. I was like, Pete, I think it's really cool. I'm just a little bit hesitant that you're trying to just tell me you're not trying to chase that 40K aesthetic, because I think you'd use the term grimdark, and we always associate grimdark with 40K just because they started trying to monopolize it, whatever. But I think what your response was, well, look at what actually happened at Dresden. I mean, that was grimdark. So I had a little tinge of hesitancy at the beginning, but then it's like, okay, that makes total sense. And then see, the board that you had for display at Adepticon, and then you'd mentioned the massive board at the UK Games Expo, which looked phenomenal, by the way. Really kind of helps sell that tone, and it's very true, because you had mentioned, I think in the preview at Adepticon, that the setting had always kind of been green fields and blue skies, and that's not really what war is. I mean, I think the tagline, is this is not war, this is the end. Is the end really green fields, or is it just busted out, destroyed buildings and remains and things like that everywhere? So I think the setting change, I think, is going to be pretty cool from everything that I've heard, and kind of the tone and the theme of the second edition and where that's going. I think it's going to be pretty cool, pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think the way I always thought about it, in the way it's, and this is not war, this is the end. You know, that was trying to really summarize it in a snappy sort of tagline, and I think that really gets across with what I was trying to say. It sums it up nicely. But if you take the camera, and it was pointed at the old version, and there's all these green fields and these little skirmishes on the outside, and actually the camera then pans around, and actually it just shows you what's been going off. So you just saw this is how I imagined it, really, is that little bit at the beginning. You see that bit, and then it pans around and actually shows you the destruction of the city, and said, no, actually, you just saw the tip of the iceberg. This is, let's go and look at actually what's been going off now. And yeah, the setting is very much about, you look at those photos of war, and it just isn't nice. And conflict essentially is man meets this entity that gives it knowledge, and then that power corrupts, and it is very much a game of humanity versus humanity. There's there's no religious wars in it. There's no exploring space and xenophobia and all those sorts of things. Those are the themes that all these other great phenomenal games, they've chosen that as their sort of backdrop, and the artistic intent, I guess, as you'd probably call it, of the game, whereas we're talking very much about what mankind are doing to each other.
I think that is an absolutely brilliant analogy of panning the camera from the first edition into the second edition. That is absolutely brilliant. So let's talk a little bit real quick, kind of about some of the gameplay changes that you've advertised so far. So we know the rule set will be based off of the third edition bolt action rule set. Makes it a little bit easier to write it, but it's going to have its own elements of it, its own special functions, special rules. We know that army construction will be based on the bolt action platoon selection, which I think is pretty cool, because I really like what you did with that for third edition bolt action. So we've got stuff added. You've mentioned the rift dice before. You've mentioned the importance that heroes are going to play. Is there any other kind of some of the just basic rule changes that you'd kind of like to highlight?
No, I think they're the main bits, really. So I talked a little bit about the weaving the IP into the game, and that's where we said, look, Rift has to be active all the way through. So right from that's why I was very keen to show those off at Adepticon, the Rift dice. So every Rift unit or something with a Rift weapon. So as long as it's got something that is Rift in it, it will have that order dice. So a normal bolt action unit, and we've talked a little bit about bolt action being compatible. It's not been the easiest thing, and I'm sure somebody out there will find something that breaks what we've done, because there's so many permutations. But something with Rift will have a Rift dice, and that allows it to use its Rift ability. This is exactly what we explained at Adepticon. Should you exhaust that dice, it then at the end of the turn gets rolled. If it rolls it again to be active or whatever, then it can get assigned to a unit again. If it's not active or surging, then it goes back in the dice bag, and that gets pulled out randomly. So we'll have a proper that's a very, very quick overview of that bit. And I know we haven't actually written an article about that, so I'm sure I'll get some feedback from the team about saying something we haven't written an article about. But we'll explain a little bit more. Maybe we'll rush it out before Wednesday or something, George. don't want to ruin your scoop or anything. But so that really brings the Rift into the game in every single moment of the game. Am I using my Rift ability? I've got I've got surging. Can I overpower my weapon or do something special with that? And then going back to the hero points as well. So Rift Mastery and Guts and Luck. And doing those bits. So they're really the main changes, and they sound like it's two things realistically, but they are absolutely fundamental for every sort of moment of every turn, as much as moving and shooting are about whether what you do. But absolutely. So when anybody who's played Lost Bolt Action read the rulebook will feel familiar. We've adapted it a lot. We've rewritten some bits, but certainly in terms of some of the order of it, some of the bits that it's the same mechanic. We know it works. We don't need to rewrite it. Let's keep some consistency there. So some of it will feel a bit more familiar than others. But no, they're the main bits. There's new platoons, so obviously
Nice.
we've got walkers and monsters, and they have to fit into an army in a specific way. So we've looked at how that works from a platoon structure point of view. I'm not going to say any more on that, but yeah, because we'll do a bit more of an explanation about what that is. But yeah,
I mean,
there's lots of cool stuff. So.
I'm sure there's probably a few little surprises you've got left in there that obviously you're not going to reveal just yet, or maybe not reveal until the book is out. But it sounds pretty cool. And yeah, again, I've said this numerous times. I can't wait. Even just looking at it from the model perspective, I love some of these new models, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. So you've mentioned before we're going to have 5 factions to start. We've got the U.S., the United Kingdom, the Soviets, the Japanese Empire, and then the Axis. And I think I can't remember the exact reasoning, but we've got a number of nations that used to kind of have their own rule sets or kind of rolled into the Axis. So like Germany and Italy, maybe Hungary and the Finns. They've kind of got they're all kind of in together now as one. And one thing that some people caught on to very quickly on pre-order day was another, not necessarily faction, but something we'd never heard of before, known as the Green Vault, which is prompted some conversations and stuff. And it sounds, so what can you tell us about who or what the Green Vault is?
A lot about well, I think the introductory article to the Axis really hints at everything that we're going to talk about so far. But this is it's what we did is we brought it all back together. So just an important bit, it's not the United Kingdom, it's the British Commonwealth.
So sorry.
Just no, it's about being clear, because it brings in all of those, the Commonwealth countries and everything. So what we decided to do is if we bring it all together, what we can do is we can then bring it apart when we can support it properly and do those bits. So when we looked at the range, we looked at our resource, looked at what we can do in the times and everything that we've got, it was very apparent we couldn't do everything we wanted to do. So, our eyes were much bigger than our bellies. We wanted to do all this stuff. We couldn't. So well, how do we give ourselves the breathing space to be able to do those things as we want to do? So, well, let's put the Axis back together. And, people say, what about Japan? We say, well, there's a good reason why they aren't. And, narratively, and this is where everybody has to really understand Konflikt 47 is an alternative universe. It looked almost identical to ours until 1944, and then it really started diverging. Okay, and it's 47. The war's still going off. There's so many different things, and to be able to give us that room to make those stories and tell a better narrative and introduce new things. There's some things we had to go and throw away, and there was a lot of discussion about some of the bits we threw away early doors. But I promise you, what's coming? They're not nice people. The Green Vault, they're not nice. So just some, it might not be called, historical names or whatever like that. But, they are very much sort of bad guys in it. But then you read some of the other stuff and think, well, they're not as aligned as they were. They're not as these factions. So, like I say, Japan's moved out. There's still a lot of lend-lease between the Commonwealth and the United States, but there's never been automated infantry in the United States Army list. So why is that? And then there's never been, fireflies and those things that, going back, you go, well, so clearly there's a lot of collaboration but distrust, and there's all those things that we can really, really work on and pull those things. And that allows us just to tell different stories and go off and do different things. So otherwise, it literally is just, and people like this is not what we wanted to do. It is World War II with a couple of different extra models in, and we wanted to go and create something where we've got lots of stories. We can bring in other characters. We can talk about the history. Dresden was 300 years in the making and over in an instant, right? So what's going off there? And it just allows us to. It's a bigger playground to play in, really. But they're the nations, I think. Did that answer the question? I got a feeling I've kind of drifted into a bit.
No, perfectly fine, because
Okay, cool.
Because if anyone's read the lore articles on the community website. I think the article on Germany mentions the Green Vault and kind of that they have been around for a while. They've kind of been behind the scenes, and it mentioned something about dabbling with the occult, and I'm like, ooh, that sounds like fun. And then again, that was one of the things that some people picked up on very early. And I thought, ooh, this sounds very interesting. And there was some conversation on one of the Facebook pages just recently, and an individual mentioned, I think, that the German translation of Green Vault, I don't speak German, happened to be something close to maybe a location in Dresden, and what it kind of translated to, and you kind of touched it. So that's not really a coincidence.
No,
so
not at all. Like, it's very deliberate. I think, and I'm sure German colleagues will jump on me. It's the Grünes Gewölbe, which is the Green Vault, and it is an actual place in Dresden, and it stores loads of artifacts. It's been prodded out a few times that maybe there's some like occult stuff in there. We're just going to dive straight into that as a thing, but actually we're going to turn it isn't just a museum. It is an organization of really horrible people that have been pulling the strings for a very long time to make things happen. And I'm going to stop talking now because I'm wandering very close into revealing stuff I shouldn't. Yes, I'm going to. Yeah, there we go.
Yep. That's good. I mean, we can always cut this. We got a few days if we need to, but that sounds very, very exciting. So we're going to have the rule book at launch in a couple of different versions. We're going to have the PDF copy is going to be available, the hardback as well as the softback that's going to come in the 2-player starter set. But the actual army lists for each of the 5 factions are not going to be in there.
No, and because we're going to give them away for free. So all the latest army list will be available. So latest point cost and special rules for each of your armies, all that, they're going to be free PDFs, accessible to everybody. And that's deliberate for 2 reasons. One is I'm very keen that this is a game that people can get into easily. So we've got loads of other content planned, how to play videos, all that sort of stuff. But people have got collections already. So as soon as I can get these army lists out, I will do. It might be closer to the actual launch than maybe I want. But I'm very keen that they're as play tested as possible. So by pulling them out, I said, look, well, that gives us a bit more time to play test some things in there as well. So that's always a bonus. And then we can unleash that to the world, and thousands of more people are going to play thousands of more games, and we'll get loads of feedback. And if there's something we missed, and I think that it's highly likely we will have missed something, or there'll be a combination that we just didn't quite see, and we've been through some playtests, and we have rewritten rules and rewritten rules and rewritten rules. That Rift Dice mechanic, that's changed goodness knows how many times. Combinations of special rules, you're like, oh crikey, that was like a 26-round combat. Is that fun? Not really. So that can happen. How often can that happen? Well, if those 2 units go against each other, it's going to be pretty much every time. Right, well, we need to think about how close combat works. So maybe close combat might work differently from how we said earlier. So maybe another little extra bit of information for you. But it's so when those things happen, what we can do then is we can look at that, and we can work out if we need to change something in the army list. We're sure that the core rule book, those rules are solid, but there's a lot of combinations of things in the army list as well. So what we can do is we can then, in 6 months' time after launch, we can say, look, let's do a rebalance, or whatever you want to call it, whatever right phrase, and we can launch new army lists. And what it means is that you just download that one file, and that is the latest army list. It isn't a list that goes with the book, which goes with an FAQ, which goes with a community article update, which goes with the errata, and all of those things together. And you think, well, how do I make sure I'm fielding the right army? Actually go, no, here's the version, this is the latest one. And when we do organized play, which we're massively keen on, sorting out some really good organized play and how to run events, things like that, is it just keeps those bits really clean. This organized play event, this is the army list that it uses. So if we unbeknowingly release a new army list 2 days before an event that we weren't quite aware of, at least you can say this is the army list that we'll be using, and it keeps that even playing field, right? So But I just want to give as much away for free as possible. I mean,
Yeah.
the guys that own the business, I'm sure, uh, want me to sell a bit more. But no, it's very much about making it an accessible game.
And I like the idea that I'm not going to have to carry around 6 different, heavy hardback books just to field one army. I might, depending on, army composition, I might have to have a couple of books, but I've got PDFs of those on my iPad now. But kind of going into that same vein, compatibility of first edition Konflikt 47 units. You have mentioned this numerous times before. Anything you have in your collection, any Konflikt 47 model that you have, will be playable in the second edition. You've made, it might be a little bit, it might function differently, but that model, that unit, you're still going to be able to play it. It's still going to have a place. It's going to have a unit entry in the army list, and it's going to have a place on the tabletop.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're developing games, there's only so far you can go with things. Certainly in a D6 game, 1 always fails. 6 typically could be always a hit. So you've only got a little bit of room to play with in some of those mechanics. So when you want to put more stuff in, you have to think very carefully about all your extra special rules and how all those things fit together. So to be able to put in, let's say, for example, Stahltruppen, who are that sort of real German heavy infantry. Well, Germany's already got heavy infantry, but let's put in the Stahltruppen. So what do those German heavy infantry become? And without going into too much, because still just prodding at some of the army list stuff, is that they will have a unit entry in those miniatures, and we'll do a list and say, look, these German heavy infantry, because of how they're armed and miniatures wise, actually they fit best with this army entry, army list entry, right? So, but if you say, you go to your friends, I say, these are my Stahltruppen. I haven't got the latest models yet, but these are my German heavy infantry. These are Stahltruppen. Go and do that. That's cool. We don't, I'm not going to come around and police anybody's games. Go and have fun and enjoy it, And I really want people to go and be massively creative and paint their armies in whatever color they want and come up with backstories and give their commanders names and do all of those things. It's part of taking it away from the actual history is to give people that option to go and paint their miniatures and create stories and be really, really creative, kit bash it all together, do some really cool conversions. I'm massively excited about seeing what the community do with that. But yeah, I think it's just really interesting, all in all, trying to get it all to fit. And the last thing I wanted ever to see was somebody burning their army because they were so upset by it. And hopefully we haven't done anything else that might upset people, but I remember that as a video when there were some changes made in another game. People were really upset. So did it make it easy for us? No, not at all. It made it really, really difficult. And the team, and certainly with the bolt action compatibility, having to try and work all of those things together, the writers, the play testers, and those people all working together to make sure that all worked. It was a real labor of love to try and get it all to fit and all to work. And we still find a little bit every now and again. You go, well, if we want to put this option in, that means this. And you go, well, do I? And that comes back a little bit to the downloadable army. So, well, actually, what we can do is we can actually add those unit options later on once maybe we've got some miniatures to support that or do those bits. But there'll be bits in those army lists where there isn't exactly the miniature for that bit. And we talked a little bit about this at Adepticon. Actually, is just go back and be creative and do a kit bash, do a conversion, and make those things work, or just do this counts as this thing for the time being in my game. It's a creative hobby. Go and enjoy it, I think.
Fantastic. I mean, I'd gotten some secondhand Schreckwolfen, and turns out one of them was missing part of an arm, right? And it was in the picture. I just didn't look closely enough. But when I got it, I'm like, oh, that's kind of a bummer. I'm like, I can work around this. So I just took some 2 millimeter thin masking tape, wrapped it around the arm. It's a bandage. He got his arm chopped off, painted it up, put a little red paint on the end. It's like, this guy's got a story now. It's like, I will paint, everybody else is gray. I'm going to paint him white. It's like, this can be like my veteran platoon leader werewolf guy. This is awesome. So yeah, I mean, the open-endedness of it is pretty awesome. And the fact that, nothing from your current collection will be invalidated is also a really cool thing. I mean, if you're not interested in any of the new miniatures, you don't have to go out and buy them. You can use your existing collection.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you have,
sorry, I love your story. I just think about that Shrek Wolf, and he's like, he is so hard. He's willing to still go back into battle with only one arm, and it's just like he's still a viable person.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? I think it's a great story, and it's little things like that that make people's army unique. Because we end up with kind of the same miniatures a lot of the time, and certainly with single pose miniatures, which exist quite a lot in most ranges, is then somebody just doing something simple. His arms come off, doesn't it? He's got a bandage in it. It just lifts your army that little bit more in your way. So no, it's cool.
Well,
I love it.
In simple head swaps, so I'm doing for my American forces, doing a Marine army, and I had a fair amount of American armored infantry. It's like, well, with a little bit of modification, the plastic Marine heads will fit on those bodies pretty well. Yeah. And then I can paint the helmet covers and that frog pattern camo. It's like, boom, I got heavy armored Marines. Simple as that. So one other thing, we talked, you've got an existing collection of Konflikt 47 miniatures. They're perfectly viable in the second edition. If I have a number of existing painted up bolt action miniatures, what's the compatibility with bolt action units?
So what we said was, if the rule exists in Konflikt 47, use the Konflikt 47 version of it. If it doesn't exist, use the bolt action version. So you'll just bring in your unit with their unit entry from your bolt action book. And this is where it starts to get a bit more complicated, because then you might end up with different books and different things, and that adds a little bit to the complexity. But going back just very quickly on the army list, is that they're designed to make it quite neat. So if you're just starting, it's nice and neat. This is the force, and then there's a whole world of bolt action if you wanted to bring those things in. Typically, they won't be as effective, or maybe not quite as interesting. So if they're not a Rift unit, they won't have Rift abilities and Rift tech and all of those sorts of things. Will certain things will be effective? So, a King Tiger still going to hurl a huge lump of metal across the battlefield at hundreds of miles an hour. Fireflies don't have armor; they're just going to get squished. These are the things. It's the same explanation I give, but it just illustrates it perfectly. I think is that there's going to be things from bolt action that are really effective, and you'll find those in the army list anyway. So you won't need to go back to your bolt action book for a lot of it. But if you look at the amount of half-track kits that we do, that just sheer amount of variety in World War II, that isn't in Konflikt 47 because it exists in bolt action if you bring that through. But I think people who have bolt action armies can start adding some Konflikt stuff in and play a really good game of Konflikt. What I really hope is that actually the Konflikt side of it is so much fun that they just want more Konflikt stuff, and it becomes a full game of Konflikt 47. But it's based in World War II, and we have to kind of keep that compatibility because those things existed. But we needed that room to tell the stories and do new miniatures and do new cool stuff. Of course. That area to grow, and it grows in Konflikt 47 that way.
So if I've got, let's say, a M4 Sherman with a T-34 Calliope launcher, or if I've got a Katyusha for my Soviets, I can just use the bolt action rules to bring those in. You may not be as effective, but if that's something I want to use, or if I'm trying to fill a gap, it's as simple as that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I say, if it exists in the Konflikt army list, use that version of the rules because it will have been adapted slightly. And actually, you might have extra options because of that. So you notice in the Axis army list, it's Panzer 4. Yeah, it is Panzer 4 with legs. So if it exists in the Konflikt bit, you might be able to give it legs and other bits like that. So you might be able to just take those standard things. But bring them in. Go and have some fun. Again, it's your game, your house, your gaming club. Go and enjoy yourselves. We might have to change the rules specifically in organised play to ensure that there's a consistency to it. But no, go and enjoy it. It's supposed to be fun, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I figure there's probably some units, things like mortars and and artillery and stuff that are going to still have some usefulness crossing over. I mean, you got to launch some smoke. Maybe there's already some Tesla artillery in the U.S. and Commonwealth inventories, but a 75 millimeter pack howitzer probably still has a use, but, you know, maybe they'll end up being Tesla mortars. Who knows? I mean, that could be a really interesting thing too. Well,
Just
and that's
what was that Tesla mod? Just going to write that down.
hey,
No,
as long
absolutely, yeah.
So, and no, that's really good to know that, you know, no one's going to be starting, you know, if they have a collection, you're not starting over from scratch. Which kind of leads into another thing I wanted to talk about just briefly, is army composition and army building. You know, we've talked about heroes, horrors, monsters, and mechs, and one thing that really kind of excites me, and I'm just, you know, I guess without giving too much away or telling us what you can tell us anyway, if I wanted to make, so let's say I'm working on an Axis army alongside my Marines, and I'm really excited about Schreckwolfen and the Totenkorps and, you know, the Nachtjagers and some of the other sort of more monstrous creations in the Axis inventory. If I wanted to construct an army that's, you know, almost, might be kind of tough to make it all monsters, you know, oops, all monsters. But if I want to make something like that, you know, is there, I mean, could I do that, you know, and have a functional army?
It's a question we've asked, and I'm not going to go into any more real detail as to when that might come, because I think being able to theme your armies and do those things is something we want to really push at some point, even deeper. But looking at the platoon structure, looking at how that works, you've got so many options. So yeah, absolutely, go and do an all monster army, and, you know, do an all mechanized army, and like I say, it's quite generic to begin with, and how those things work. So those platoons are literally just like largely the same as bolt action, but with some other ones chucked in specifically because of mechs and monsters. But these are where the stories we can tell, right? So let's say we get to supplement 2 or 3, and we want to really dive into a specific scientist. No, this isn't actually what's happening. This is purely an example. It might end up being very close to this, but we'll see what happens, right? So we might want to tell stories about the things they're created, and actually what we might do is we might release 2 or 3 new monster units, different experiments, talk about all that sort of stuff. And actually, if you take this scientist, I am just making this up now, if you take that scientist as the lead character in your platoon, actually that unlocks a specific platoon, and then you can fill it full of monsters, and then if you have X amount of monsters, you can do X, Y, and Z. But really, so rather than adding in loads and loads and loads of extra nations, I think a really great way for us to explore the stories is to keep those nations quite tight, and then explore the themes of armies within that to begin with. And then in a few years' time, maybe we can add another nation or two, and see how we go. But we've got years worth of broad stroke ideas about what we want to do. We've got a broad story arc that we want, and we know kind of what that culmination is. But in terms of real detail about exactly what happened in every story, we're not there, not on all of it anyway. So, but yeah, we're very, very clear about the overall arc about what's happening.
So, but we've got some pretty good flexibility in our army list to kind of theme them how we want to.
100%. Go make it up. Again, just go and have some fun.
Oops, all monsters. All right. Yep. So, okay. All new models and everything. We've known from the beginning that there were going to be new models for this, and I think, you know, we saw some brief glimpses, some silhouettes at Adepticon, but then the UK Games Expo shortly before is when we kind of got a brief preview of some stuff. And we know we've got, I think there were four new kits previewed at the UK Games Expo. We've of course got the linebacker jump walker. We've got the new Fireflies, which look phenomenal, by the way. The Vogel spinner, as well as the Stall Trooper. Yeah. How well were those received at the UK Games Expo? Because they were first on display at the expo.
So there's 2 things really at the expo. One was those miniatures in the display, and having all of those on the display, it was just non-stop people looking and engaging with it. And my boss rang me, and it was a bizarre compliment. He said, "You actually sound happy, Peter." And I was like, you know, I actually am, because everybody's worked so hard on this, and just seeing everybody really engage with that and just talk about how exciting and how cool it all looks. We had you talked about the big linebacker earlier, so we've got the UK version. You know, and that was just bringing people in, and there were people taking their pictures next to it and things like that. He said, you know, it's a model. It's, oh, really? Can I buy a kit of this? Oh, that's so cool. I really want to get one. And but people have really, really liked the new models. And, you know, you're never going to design a miniature that everybody loves. And I think after so many years of creativity in all these sorts of genres, then everything's going to remind people of something else. And I talked to the design team quite a bit about this. Look, we're going to end up making something that might look familiar. And actually, there's a level of familiarity that's quite good, right? Because people then can understand what it is and they'll read it quite quickly and go, oh, they look like Germans. Oh, yeah, that's because they're actually, they are, but they're called the Axis in this game, and this is why. And people are able to link with those things. But overall, all I've seen is just tons of positivity about that. Those models, and I can't wait to show off the next load of new miniatures.
Ooh, boy, that's
because they just my job is, you know, not just say my job. My job is not easy. We do a lot, and I work a lot of hours because I'm really, really passionate about what we do. I would not do this. I would not go to these lengths if, and neither would anybody in the team. You know, I'm surrounded by people who put in over 100% of what is asked of them all the time, staying late, conversations, like I say, just a phenomenal team. And it's driven by passion and desire, not through, you know, how we run things, but and it is, you know, trying to get things done on time. There's always problems, all these things at work, and work is work, right? But if it wasn't, you know, if I didn't get to look at these amazing miniatures every day and be like, you know, it's worth it. Somebody shows you something, you get an idea, and you have a conversation, and those ideas move forward another notch, and it just moves on a touch, and you get something that is good, and then it becomes great, and it's just a really, really great feeling to be surrounded by these creative people who make these amazing things, and, you know, helping them and working with them is you know, it's a privilege, really. I think it feels like that anyway. You know, I obviously get paid. It's a job, it's work, but, you know, I'm glad I don't do anything else, right?
Yeah, and I would agree. From, you know, for me, the hobby, it's a lot of it is about modeling and painting. And, you know, I don't spend as much time actually rolling dice maybe as I would like, but at the same time, I get a lot of fun out of painting and modeling. And the models that we've seen so far, which, you know, as I mentioned, the linebacker, the new Fireflies, the Vogel Spinner, and the Stahltruppen, all look absolutely incredible. And when pre-order day came along on the 4th of July, I happened to have the day off work. And, you know, I was up very, very early that day to put a pork shoulder on my smoker, you know, for the American Independence Day. So it was like 4 a.m, and I'm like immediately jumping on the Warlord website, like, it's pre-order day. Wait, why is there nothing here yet? And then, you know, someone had mentioned that, you know, there's a countdown on the Konflikt 47 website. And it's like, oh, I got to wait a few more hours. But, you know, I got on there immediately, you know, once pre-orders went live, and started looking through all the options, you know, because we knew that there was going to be a 2-player starter. Obviously the rule book. And I think I don't know if we knew at the time that there would be some new faction starters for the Axis and for the Americans. You know, in my head, I was trying to add up, okay, so here's what stuff was for the first edition. It was about, you know, 170 for the faction starters, and this is in US dollars. And then comparing like the Battle of the Bulge 2-player starter set, it's like, well, this retails for about 150, trying to figure out about how much I was going to spend, you know, to get everything that I wanted. And ended up spending about what I thought I would, which got me everything that I wanted plus a little bit more. But there were a couple of other models that had not been mentioned previously until pre-order day. And that, of course, was being the new Panther 4X that was obviously very present in the first edition, but now it's on legs. And it's got potentially, you know, a slightly different looking gravity gun, as well as sort of a redesign of my pronunciation is going to be terrible, the Nachtleben, which I don't know if that's correct or not, but I Googled the translation. It came up as like nightlife, and I'm like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, so they're Nacht Alben, which, depending on where you look at the translation, sometimes it translates into night elves, but yeah, it's kind of these night demons is the essence of what that word is trying to get across. But yeah, we thought we'd drop a couple of extra little things in there for people that turn up.
Those were pretty neat. And again, like I said, so there was a lot that was available on pre-order day. So obviously the 2-player starter set featuring the Axis and the Americans, and then you had the individual starter sets for both, again, the Americans and the Germans, and then you had some larger bundles for faction specific sides. But then I went all in and got the Rift Buster Mega Bundle because it had everything that I wanted. Enough to get a really good base started to add to what I currently already have, plus a few bonus extras. So, and you get the hard copy of the rule book, along with the, you got to pick one of the 2 special characters with the rule book, but by spending X amount, you get a free copy of the sort of the dual diorama that includes both of the special figures. It threw in a Konflikt 47 dice bag, as well as the PDF copy of the rules, which is really awesome. Which I will remind everyone, you do still have a couple of days to get your pre-order in, and if you do pre-order the rule book, you do get that free PDF included if you order before the end of July. So shameless self-plug, hit that link down below to head to the Warlord Games website and get your pre-orders in. So yeah, I was really I've never been that excited to spend that much. Okay, I've been very excited to spend that much money before, but I think that was the largest one-time purchase of gaming stuff I have ever made before. And I was happy to do it. It's kind of funny because you kind of got to go back in history a little bit more to how Pete and I met, as well as Colin Stone, who is the head of accounting at Warlord Games. Colin had sent both you and started a group chat, sent you and I a message making sure that the number of rivets on the linebacker were correct before, I believe it was who has a meltdown referring to me. So. And then, I think it was just last week I sent him a message. I'm working on a Tesla Sherman, and I scratch built some, ad hoc wooden armor like you would see a lot on M4 Shermans in the Pacific Theater used by the Marines, and just said, hey, Colin, there's not enough rivets on here. I had to add a bunch of stuff to hide the fact that there's incorrect rivets. So, having some fun with that. But yeah, so pre-orders went live on the 4th of July. So it's been, a good about 3 weeks about now that you've been able to get the pre-orders in. And just to confirm, you're hoping to start shipping all these pre-orders around the end of September, correct?
Everything we do and is to make sure that when we say it's the a street date, and the street date is the end of September, is that everybody has their stuff by then. What typically happens is, because for example, shipping to Australia from the UK can be 3 or 4 days to 2 weeks. We do start shipping stuff early, so there's a high chance that physical copies of all of these things will start appearing out in the wild a little bit before that date. Yeah, it's everything's on track to ship on time. Everything's looking good. I'm
Awesome.
Can't tell you how excited I am for me to get my hands on that the book. Hardback book. Just lots of cool things we've done with it that I think people will really like when they get it in their hands.
I mean, if you want to pull my order out of line, when it's getting ready to ship, and maybe pass it around the creative team, get a few autographs in there, it's not going to hurt my feelings at all.
You got it. I'll sort it. Just ping me a message. I'll sort that.
So, yeah, that sounds absolutely awesome. And of course, we're still very early in the community articles, and it sounds like you've got a lot of stuff lined up. You've mentioned, articles on various lore articles, as well as some gameplay articles and tutorials on how to play. I think those are going to be absolutely fantastic. I know it's new to me, but I know, another game company tends to send out, advanced copies and stuff ahead of time to, certain outlets, with, of course, dates that they can't mention anything beforehand. I mean, is that something that Warlord does? They'll send out like a advanced copy of the rules or something so people can get it in their hands early and get that stuff so that they can start putting stuff out, on day one.
Yeah, we've got loads of people that we work really closely with. We've got a list of people that we send stuff to. It's shameless marketing. Realistically, we want as many people talking about our product as possible. But it's great to be able to send out really cool, fun stuff like this and get people excited about it, because the more people that are playing, the more people are excited about it, the more opponents we're going to have, the more people we can talk to about it. And that all really helps with the game. So there's a list of people that I'll go out to. I won't mention any names, but we've got some good people that are going to do some great content for us.
I should have proceeded that question with, it sounds self-serving, but just genuine curiosity, because I love that companies do that, so that on day one, or with a recent new edition of another company's game coming out on pre-order day, is when a number of people were able to start talking about the products that they had been sent ahead of time. So it was really cool to see that, even though I've more or less moved out of that particular game because I'm jumping into Konflikt 47. I mean, I've already dove in head first. Luckily there, it wasn't in the shallow end, but just general curiosity. So I guess the last thing that I've got for you here, what do you say? Well, just the other day, I got my hotel room booked for Adepticon 2026. I could not have been more excited. I'm back at the Hilton, and I know they'll have some after hours gaming space there. What do you say? You, me, we'll get some pizzas. I'll bring a nice bottle of bourbon. After hours game of Konflikt 47. I'll bring definitely both the armies.
Yep.
Fantastic.
I'm in. Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, Adepticon, I really fell in love with that as a show the first time I met. And going back to what you said, that first time we met was just a really great experience of meeting gamers and doing that thing. Seeing a con like that. It was the first con really I'd been to, which was like an overnight thing, and everybody gaming in the evening. We come around, we go into that room, and you were there doing this stuff, and it was like, oh, here's George again. We meet you outside, we have the crazy conversations, and it's just such a great place to be. So absolutely, I'm massively looking forward to being there.
I think maybe someday after Colin retires, I might be able to tell the story of how we first met. It was an absolutely insane story, and I would not have changed a single thing about it. And I talk to you, more frequently than I talk to Colin, but I absolutely love interacting with Colin. He is an absolutely phenomenal individual, and I'm so glad I had that experience, because I met you guys, become friends with you guys, and it's been an absolute phenomenal experience. And
thanks, George. Thank you.
So with absolutely. With that, that's really all the questions that I have. I know we've been here for quite a while, but I think a lot of great information, and I'm like, and I've told you multiple times before, I'm excited, and we had a discussion the other day regarding the lore around the Americans, and when I first read it, I had a little bit of hesitancy around it, but just some personal stuff. But then I'm like, oh my goodness, that is a just absolute narrative masterstroke if that's the route they're going with it, because it feeds into the theme and everything perfectly. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is so insane. I love it. Oh my God, so excited. Still very much, I mean, but we don't need to go into my personal issues.
No, it's there was good feedback, and I really appreciated your honesty on that one. And it's that sort of feedback that just helps us reflect back on things as well. So we make these decisions, and we're sure we've got it right. You throw it out there, and sometimes it doesn't land quite as you want to, but without diving into that specific bit, is they're just the beginning of it, and I want everybody to really focus on the stories about people and all the stuff that goes off. So some of those things will. The more that's in there, it won't seem quite as big, I don't think.
It's going to be good, is all I can. It's going to be incredible. So, all right. Well, Pete, I want to thank you again so much for joining me today. It has been an absolute blast, as always, to talk to you.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
No, just get in touch with us if you've got thoughts and ideas, feedback, anything like that. We're really open. We're an open business. We get a lot of messages, so just bear with us as we, with that stuff. But I just want everyone to go and enjoy Konflikt. Go and be creative. Go and make stuff up. Go and have some really great battles. Create cinematic gaming moments that your children's children are going to want to talk about that game at Christmas or whatever. So, just go and enjoy it.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much. And folks, I really do hope you enjoy this. I can tell you, it's a great experience getting to talk to my friend Pete here anytime. But in the meantime, don't forget to click those links down below for the Mediocre Modeling Studio social media, as well as my Warlord link. Again, you've got until July 31st to get that rulebook ordered, get that free PDF copy. You can also click the link for the Wisconsin Maritime Museum to stay up to date on the USS Cobia dry docking project. I can't wait for that to take place and just find out what all they do, and hopefully maybe get back up there next March and see her again. So as always, folks, thank you very much for watching. If you feel so inclined, please like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, may your paints be thin, your brushes be pointy, and your dice be hot. Yeah.